Hello everyone, and thank you for joining me today. I'm going to make a slimline card featuring these cute little birdies from the So Tweet stamp set and thin cuts. You can buy these as a standalone stamp set, but if you like having thin cuts like I do, you can purchase them as a stamp set with the thin cuts. So I thought I'd share with you what I'm going to do today is make a Distress Oxide background, use the Fancy Borders thin cuts, and I'm also going to share with you some colouring that I did for these, just so that you can watch how I colour. I'm not necessarily an expert in colouring, but I do love to do it, so I thought I would share that today. The first thing I'm going to do though, just to give it a little bit of a chance to dry, is apply some Distress Oxide inks to this panel. This panel is cut to fit a slimline card, which is 3.5 by 8.5 inches. I'm going to trim it down a bit so that there will be a white border later, but for the purposes of doing the blending, I'm going to start with the full size of the panel base. I'm just getting a post-it note to put underneath my fingers. And I'm only going to use the two colours today, and just start by coming in and graduating up. For this one, I don't want it to be a totally smooth effect through here. I want little bits of white to show to make it look like clouds. And then I'm going to come in with my water brush and do some splotching. So I like to squeeze a little bit out and then grab another pen and just do some splatters. And I'll grab my paper towel and just tap that off to see how I'm going with my splatters. And I'm just going to add a few more. And this time I'm going to drop dots in where I want some bigger ones. So you don't have to just do splatters, you can place the dots as well. So I quite like how that looks, so I'm just going to set that aside to dry for a little bit and clean off my mat. These are the little birdies, there's 3 in the set that I have coloured in, and you can see what I've done with 2 of the balloons is I've stamped this image here, thin cut it out, but then just cut with some scissors that section so I can have more balloons, and that will fit behind with my placement of where I'm going to put things. Now I'm going to colour these in, and I'll just do one as a sample. The Spectrum Noir markers that I've used are the Gold Yellow blend and the Citrus blend, so I've combined both of these. The Citrus blend I wanted to give more depth, so I'm going to start with the mid colour. It just adds a little bit more shadow than just using the Citrus blend on its own. So I'm going around the edges here of the little birdie where I think the shadow might be. There'd be a bit of a shadow underneath this little crown of flowers. And of course underneath the chin, along the bottom of the body, and then along the sides. So that's the first layer I'm putting down. Then I'm going to the light of this same gold yellow blend and just bringing the colour out a little bit more, going over the top of the areas that I've coloured with the mid tone. And now that I've done that, I'm going to the Citrus blend, and I'll start with the dark. And for this blend, I'm going to use all 3 of the tones. So you can see I'm going over the area that I just coloured to blend the 2 tones that I've already put down there. and bring this in and blend it out a little bit. And then once I've done that, I can go to the mid. And I'm being careful to leave an area here for the light of the citrus blend. And these two shades work really, really well to deepen the yellow because the citrus is quite light. To add just a bit more shadow, I'm going back in with the medium. I just feel like it needs to be deepened up just a little bit. And you can do little circular motions or you can do little dots. These little chicks are fluffy, so a few little dots work quite well. And I know I'm going over the colouring that I have already done, but it does make a difference to add a little bit more depth. So now I'm going in with the light of the gold yellow blend. And then I'll come back in with the citrus blend and just, I've got the dark here. And this gives quite a bit more depth and shadow to the image rather than just using the citrus blend colour. Adding the gold yellow blend just gives a little bit more attention to the detail of it. And then to do the little beak, I'm just going in with the orange blend, and this is just a small area, so I'm just touching lightly with the darkest end. I'm going to skip the middle bit altogether and just touch the edge there. The flowers are fairly simple to colour in because they're a small image. You don't want to do too much around them, so I've just got this pale pink shades colour, and I'm going to skip the middle again because it is just a small area. Sometimes when it's small, trying to add all three, light, medium and dark, it doesn't give enough distinction between the image. And then I'm going to do exactly the same thing for these tiny little leaves here. And I've just dabbed down near the bottom of them with the dark. And this is the dull green blend, and finished it off. So now I'm going to do a balloon. So I'm going to start with the darkest of the pink violet blend and just go around this edge here of the balloon. So my light's going to be coming from this way. Sometimes it helps if you put the lid of the marker that you're using there just to remind you that that's where the light source is coming from. Then I'm going to go in with the mid. And balloons being circular, you want to sort of, you can do strokes like that. It doesn't have to all be little circles. It's good to do little circles when you're doing fine little areas, but sometimes with the big ones, because these markers blend so well, you can do more sweeping lines with them. They're a little bit more forgiving. So here I'm leaving a white section that will be like a highlight of the balloon, and then coming in with the light to blend this area out, and you can see how it's taking the colour away. And then it's just a case of going back in with my colours again just to smooth everything out. So let's go back to this panel. I'm going to use the hilly looking part of the fancy border, and I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine. But before I do this, I'm going to trim my panel down because I want a white border all the way around. Now I know I want to take 1/4 inch off, but I'm going to take 1/8 off all the way around so that I don't get this area here where I've come in with my blending tool. And as you can see, that will sit on top of the card and leave a nice white border around it. So I'll run these through and then I'll be back for final assembly. So as you can see, I've changed my mind a little bit. I decided not to do all of the hill shape, and I brought in this other one which turned upside down like this. It looks a little bit like clouds, and I could fit all this back in like a puzzle, just like I did with the Besties cards, but I've decided to take this away and create some layers and leave some white space in the middle. So I'm going to adhere this down with the bottom section just with a regular tape, and then pop the rest up on foam tape and then put the little birds in. Now because this pops up, because I've folded it over, I find that it's handy just to put a little bit of the dot roller on there, because I can always rub that off later, and that will hold that nice and flat so it doesn't keep popping up for me. So I'm just going to position these and start sticking everything down, and I'll fast forward through all of this part. I'll speed it all up so you don't have to sit right through the whole thing. This piece here I've adhered with my normal tape runner. This layer here I'm doing with the thin 3D foam tape, and then this one here I'm going to do with the thicker 3D foam tape. So I've put the thicker 3D foam tape at the bottom, and then I'm going to put the thin 3D foam tape at the top because of this layer here. And then I'll repeat this same process here. The bottom layer will have just a normal tape runner, the next one will have the thin 3D foam tape, and the top one will have thick 3D foam tape at the top and a little bit of thin just here. So that gives layering to the clouds at the top and the hills at the bottom, which is really, really sweet. And then you can tuck these little birds in amongst them. Now for this one here, as I said, I did try to put some white pen to hide those, but what I'm going to do is just adhere this to the back like so. I'm going to get some liquid glue so I know that it's really, really going to stick properly. And then I'm going to cut off this bottom section here so that it looks like the string's coming out from underneath. So this is the longest bit. I'll put a little bit of glue on here. So it almost looks like the balloon's carrying him up, which is rather cute. And this one I can just arrange it so that I can tuck it straight underneath. And then I can adhere these down, and I just have to bear in mind that some of these areas are raised and some are flat to the card. So that will determine what part of adhesive I use. So the bottom part of him will have the 3D foam tape and the top part adhering the balloon will be flush. So I'll just put some tape runner on the top and then put the 3D foam tape on the bottom. I'm going to cut a very fine little bit to put over the end of that balloon. And then the thinner 3D foam tape for the other part of him that's over this middle section here. For this one, I can attach her straight to the card. So I'm just going to use liquid glue for this one. She doesn't need to be popped up at all. And I want a little foot to come over the top of the hill just a little bit. And then he's going to be on 3D foam tape as well. So this part's going to have the thicker part of the 3D foam tape, or what we call just 3D foam tape, and then this middle section here, the thin, and then this one flush. So that looks a bit cute, and now I'm going to put a little sentiment on the front. Now what I've done is I've stamped the Your So Tweet, which is one long sentiment here, but I've masked it so that I can have 3 different sections. And I'll show you how I did that, just with some post-it notes. So this is just a little strip of paper that's about 1/2 inch. And I want the Your, so I'm going to ink that up and line it up so that the rest of the stamp is off on top of the post-it note. And then I'm just going to turn that around because now I just want the tweet. So I've inked that up. So they're the 2 easy parts of it to do. The sew is a little bit trickier. You've got to put a post-it note over one side to not get the Your part, and then a post-it note over the side would normally have the tweet stamped on there. So because our blocks and our stamps are see-through, this makes it quite easy to work out where to go. And I think I've guessed that to be right the very first time. So I'll just ink that part up. Excuse me if my head's in the way, but I want to make sure that I get this right. So now I've got the 3 sections, 3 pieces that I can cut to go onto the front of the card. I could have run the sentiment all the way across the bottom here, but I think it's quite cute in the middle there. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere that. And now just a few little finishing touches with some bitty sparkles and some clear sparkles. I think what I want to do is put these little bitty ones in the center of these flowers. They fit really nicely in there. I like the addition of the little sparkles. It just finishes the card off nicely. I hope you've enjoyed watching this and the techniques with the Distress Oxides and how I colour images in, especially these cute little Tweety birds. I think they're absolutely adorable. I'll put some still shots up at the end of the video. Thank you so much for tuning in again. I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.